antisocial fashion, an attitude MacGyver would be proud of, and how you can adopt a hostel with Kash Bhattacharya. I'm Joe Bauer, and this is Travel Tomorrow, the podcast about how travel trends influence everyday life, whether you like it or not. Or no, whether you travel or not. Whether you like it or not probably works too. I'm coming to you, as always, from Berlin. My co-host, Alicia Underly Nelson, is in West Fargo, North Dakota. I thought it was Fargo. We're in West Fargo now.
Technically, I live in West Fargo, but that's confusing to most people.
Well, on episode 16, we're getting more honest about our location, whatever the government has all the information anyway, and can find us whenever we like. Another thing to worry about in pandemic times. And speaking of, Alicia, I think we're getting to the point where we're all running out of hobbies to start doing during the pandemic. Everybody's baked their bread. Are you still finding anything new to try?
I am. I've been doing watercolor painting, which has been kind of fun. Took an online course in that, learned how to paint galaxies and do wax relief and mix colors and all kinds of cool things.
Wax relief?
Yeah, like you take it's essentially like a white crayon, and then whatever you color, whatever shape you make, then resists the water, so you are able to leave little areas where there's no paint, which is kind of interesting.
It sounds vaguely adult, like, come to our parlor for a soothing wax relief.
It's a very technical word, but basically it's a crayon. It's been a good time. I don't know. I'm a decent enough photographer, but I was always that kid in art class that when they were asked to replicate something by drawing or painting, like, I know what it looks like. I cannot replicate it with any skills in my arsenal at all, except a camera. But with watercolors, it's a little bit more forgiving, so it's been kind of fun. I actually bought the right paper, which makes a big difference, and decent brushes, and I have no idea. I don't even care if these things look good, which is kind of a big step for someone that is a perfectionist in many things. I just enjoy the process, which is good. It's a good lesson, I think.
It's funny that you've got onto the art kick, because that's been the new hobby I've re-picked up, if I can make up a phrase. I used to be all into the drawing when I was a kid, and one of the very first when Germany started relaxing laws, content restriction laws, one of the first things to open up were like small stores, and so the art store opened up, and I went over and got me a sketch pad, and now I'm sketching again, like a 18th century romantic who would used to sit by the river and like sketch his day away. Except I'm not doing it by a river. I'm doing it on the couch and like sketching my dog.
Hey,
it's a little different.
That still counts, right? We got to work with what we have in our environment, so why not? And
I don't have much in my arsenal either, so we're not working with a whole lot, but that's okay. It's a pandemic. Have a party, I guess.
Yeah, there's something to be
said
for...
not a Corona party.
Something to be said for good materials and trying something new. That's what's been interesting about this whole process, I think, is that people are sort of stretching the activities that they're familiar with and stretching their own limits and trying different things in a way that, I mean, I certainly wouldn't have taken an online watercolors class before. It wouldn't have even been on my radar, but I think it's kind of interesting. You know, you learn something new. And that's what I've been missing most about travel, I think, is that opportunity to like see something you're not familiar with or try something new because, you know, why not? And I think that it's been good that even though we're stuck in our homes and we're not going to be traveling for the foreseeable future, at least there's still a chance for novelty. Like, people have really come through. We're adaptable, and that's what I've been gaining from these last couple weeks is everybody's dealing with restrictions, but we're finding creative ways around them, which is fun.
And speaking of novelty and adaptability, I'm going to segue the hell out of this. We've been talking about art, and a form of art and the way people are embracing the pandemic is embracing an anti-social side of fashion. And for more on that, Alicia has our first stop.
Now boarding.
What do you do when the people around you won't practice social distancing? Folks around the world are coming up with creative ways to keep people a proper distance away. A guy in Italy wore a giant disc. A Brooklyn photographer went out in a big inflatable plastic bubble, like that Bubble Boy movie. And Australia's Daily 10 had a really great roundup of some of the best looks, including people donning giant inflatable giraffe and pink unicorn costumes, a couple of people dressed up in bananas in pajamas ensembles, a pair of knights going shopping in armor, complete with metal helmets, and for a fun and slightly scary post-apocalyptic touch, a full gas mask. And I think it's funny.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's funny because, I mean, the visuals are great, but you kind of don't even need to see them to appreciate how amusing that would be to see someone walking down the sidewalk or like in aisle 6 of the grocery store dressed this way. And there's been a lot of chatter on Twitter too, about people joking about bringing back, and Instagram also, about bringing back historical looks like those bird plague masks the doctors used to wear to keep their distance. Oh yeah,
those are creepy.
Back in the day. I mean, they're scary, big beaks and weird eyes. But people have been talking too about the big hoop skirts from the Civil War era. And a lot of those things were about creating a physical barrier, so it's sort of funny that we're bringing them back again, even if we're kind of joking. And
I would like to see a hybrid, like get with the gas mask person in a room with the creepy bird mask person, let them have a baby and just see like the horrifying thing that comes out of there. Like, because I'm thinking, when I think gas mask, I'm thinking of like those things that they wore in like World War I, and those things can spawn nightmares. Of course, the creepy bird face can as well. So you put those together, you've got yourself like a Stephen King character.
Well, that's what's cool, is that there are, like, fashion is actually adapting and kind of pulling these influences. I mean, street fashion has always influenced high fashion, and now, I mean, it's happening pretty quickly. I read a story in Vogue, which we'll link to in the show notes also, that this focus on this volume and these huge skirts and these broad shoulders and veils, you know, kind of a play on the mask, is actually influencing designers' collections for fall 2020. So, I mean, it's really fun to see this hybrid. And even there's a lot of designers that I follow on Instagram. A woman I know that I went to high school with, Michelle Ubrist, has always kind of done this post-apocalyptic design, very dark, very festival-oriented. And she's pulling a lot of these influences in too, because it's what everybody's talking about. And how can you not be changed? I mean, your vision of what we wear has changed a lot in the past 6 weeks. I mean, all of a sudden, sweatpants are okay, like, it's totally fine to wear sweatpants.
For the record, always been okay with me. Also, I've been very pro you pants optional if you're like doing a meeting from home and they can only see you from the waist up. So perhaps I have been a trendsetter in that account.
Yes, this is your moment. Like, the zeitgeist of 2020 is like comfort and protection. So it's like this really weird combination of like comfy on the bottom and like armor and like surgical masks on top. Like, that's really strange. And there's not really anything in recent history that would prompt that. So yeah, I mean, art responds. And I think the people that wear the crazy unicorn outfits, like the big blow up ones, where like you're hidden inside like billowing inflated fabric. Like, it's funny and it's a joke, and they probably are protected, but I mean, they're kind of onto something. We couldn't have imagined
maybe
we dressed like this.
But I'm going to be honest, and the only fashion words I understood in what you just said, I learned from Zoolander. So that is about the extent of my fashion knowledge. But yeah, sure, with my lack of knowledge, maybe we are onto something.
I just think it's great that we've gotten to talk about fashion 2 episodes in a row.
Did we talk about it in the last one? That's how much I tune off on fashion.
The last one was all about historical costume constitutionals. We've got fashion history in twice. But we can move on from history, if you like, to something a little more contemporary, and we can talk about a subject that Joe does know something about: hostels.
Now boarding.
That's actually a lie. I know very little about hostels. I've stayed in like 2 when I went on a trip to Ireland. But I spoke with somebody who knows all the things about the hostels. When I think about hostels, I think of this guy. And that's why for this episode, I interviewed Kash Bhattacharya, who has launched a program to help keep hostels around the world afloat until we can all travel again. He stayed in countless hostels around the world for his work with The Budget Traveler, a blog that won him National Geographic Travel Blogger of the Year in 2016. That is pretty damn impressive. He's also the author of The Grand Hostels, Luxury Hostels of the World. And I started by asking him to tell us a little bit about his program, Adopt a Hostel.
So adoptahostel.com is a voucher platform for the hostel industry, which me and a couple of friends in the hosteling industry set up when the crisis hit in February. Some of our friends in the hosteling industry in Italy were already under lockdown for 2 weeks. They were the first to go into lockdown. And a fantastic hostel called the Beehive in Rome, run by a couple called Steve and Linda. They've been running the hostel, I think, for now close to 30 years. Might need to ask them again. But they are like a cornerstone of the community, travel community in Rome, and their hostel is not just a hostel. It's a place where locals meet travelers, and they do a whole bunch of amazing things, including a story travelers evening, which gathers storytellers from all over Rome for one evening. And they have this beautiful garden, and it's in Termini. And I love what they have created and what they stand for, because their hostel is all about community. And when I saw them put out their call out saying, we're desperately needing help, we're not going to survive, we have no support or little no support from the government, we need you to buy vouchers which you can use against future stays. And I thought, this is a great idea. I spoke to a few other hostel owners, and everybody said, oh, we'd love to do something similar, but we don't have the technical ability to sell vouchers. We can give people email addresses. So that's when I started talking to a guy called Leo Slepkov, who runs a consulting firm for the hostel industry called Hostel.consulting. And he said, I know this company called GiftUp, which offer vouchers. Maybe we can convince them to come on board and give us the tech, which we can then put into a platform. And that led us to the third part of the puzzle, was the marketing and PR, because that's something I know, but we still struggle. So we got two girls. They run a consulting firm called Stay the Night, and they came on board and said, we can do this, this, this. And suddenly what started as a simple conversation became a platform and a website. In 3 weeks, we've been working hard on it, and it launched last week.
What's the response been like from the hostel owners? Can you give an idea of how many are signed up?
We have 300 people have expressed an interest and started signing up, and we have now 150 verified hostels on the platform from 50 countries.
And have they given any kind of feedback on people who have gotten the vouchers, or?
At the moment, there are no numbers we have yet about how much we've raised so far, but I've heard some anecdotal, some few hostels get back saying that they've sold a fair few vouchers, and it's been really good. I can't give numbers, but it's so far seems to be working well. And the first thing is that you go to your friends and your family, and they are obviously always willing to support. But what we're trying to do is see if we can get the media on our side and help push this message out to a wider audience, which is where you come into the equation. This is great.
I'm happy to do my part.
But it's a huge challenge. But so far it's going well. We got a mention in National Geographic Traveller UK today. Irish Independent did a feature yesterday. But the best thing has been the whole blogging influencer community in travel. It's been very humbling and very heartwarming to see a lot of friends I've known for so many years come together and say, Kash, what do you need us to do? We'll push it out. And that's personally very pleasing for me, because when people say influencers are white, spoiled and privileged and don't seem to care, this is the narrative that's been spun out in the media, especially in the last few weeks. I've been seeing a lot of very negative press about influencers and about how they prattling on about how they miss travel and they seem to be stuck in a bubble, which is the case with some influencers. But I believe there are a lot of really good influencers that really give a damn about people and want to help people. So I hope this project kind of shows people that there are influencers and people who really have heart and give a damn.
I kind of want to step back for a second and give kind of the origin story for your relationship with hostels, because it's not like you're just suddenly interested in hostels. Hostels have been like your thing for as long as I've known you as Kash, as a budget traveler. So tell us about that. Why are you so interested in hostels?
My relationship with hostels goes back to when I was a student in Scotland. I went to university as an international student, paying a ridiculous amount of money on my tuition fees. If any of you've lived or studied abroad, you know how much of it is a drain on your finances and your parents' mental well-being.
Or you just be an
going
American
abroad.
and go to college in the United States,
That,
and
that that's
then you
terrible
financially
too.
drain anyway.
You're practically in debt for the rest of your life. And I didn't have much money to travel, but back in 2001, Ryanair had just launched, and they used to do these amazing 2 pence midnight sales. If you were lucky enough, you'd bag a return seat to destination Europe for 2 pence. And I didn't have much money. I was heavily in debt. And the only way I could afford to travel was because of Ryanair and because of hostels. And I would find the cheapest bed possible. And a lot of people would groan even then and say, "Oh God, it must be terrible living in these hostels in these smelly places full of dirty people." And people have this kind of, I think it's because of that movie, The Hostel, that didn't help the brand Hostel. Everybody thinks of them as filled with pimply, snotty-faced 18-year-old somethings and serial killers. But hostels are great places to meet people from all backgrounds, and I think it's the most democratic institution on earth, because when you go into a hostel, there are no barriers. We walk into a room full of strangers and you're immediately accepted for who you are. And even at the age of 41, I walk into a hostel and I still feel that buzz as I felt all those years ago when I'd walk in and people would say, "Oh, where are you from? And what do you do?" And it just always feels like it brings you back to reality and makes you appreciate the finer things in life. And I fell in love with hostels then, even though I didn't have a penny. They introduced me to a world of travel, of people, of love and sex, and bad sex and good sex, and friendships, and bad hangovers, and memorable meals. And it teaches me a lot about who I am as a person. I think I can do a timeline of the hostels I visited and my own life and how I've grown as a person from one hostel experience to another.
It really sounds like you've had the whole spectrum of life experiences at hostels.
I just think hostels are such a great place. And the thing is that hostels are no longer the preserve of just young people. They're people of all ages you meet. And that's one thing that always surprises people, that, "Oh, is it just full of young people?" And I said, "No, there's people of all ages nowadays." And, I wrote a book, which, the Grand Hostels, Luxury Hostels of the World. The idea of writing that book was basically to explain that the world of hosteling had kind of grown up from that image that movie portrayed of horrible dorms and serial killers, that they're actually sane, nice people that go to hostels, and people of all backgrounds. And you can find a private room, you can have a dorm if you don't have much money, but you have great facilities like a common room or a bar where you can meet people. You have a club, you have a cinema, you have a swimming pool, you have a gym. It's incredible what you find in hostels nowadays.
Do you have a favorite hostel memory that comes to mind?
Favorite hostel memory, so many to choose from. I think my most emotional hostel memory is in April 2012, when I had just quit my job, a very safe, well-paid job in Scotland, and I took the foolish decision of leaving a well-paid job to go traveling around Europe with a month or 2 months savings in the bank account, with the idea of writing a book about hostels, this new world of grown-up hosteling. I called it Luxury Hostels. And I wasn't sure if I was making a really sensible idea. And the first hostel I researched and visited was in Porto, called the Gallery Hostel. It's a 17th century aristocrats residence that they converted lovingly into a hostel with an art gallery inside. And I walked in, and I was just gobsmacked when I walked in and I saw this hostel, and perfectly varnished floors, clean, lovely smiling people. I was treated to a 3-course Portuguese meal with a bottle of port wine for €10, the best deal of my life. And not only did I have an amazing meal, but I met a whole bunch of very, very nice, lovely people from all backgrounds across that table, and got horribly drunk with them that night. And that night was like my wake-up call in my life. It was like, this is what I want my life to be every night. I want to meet people. I want to learn so much. I want to drink bad, good wine. I want to eat good food. I want this to continue. So I continued on that path, and that turned out to be the right path in the end for me.
You've had a lot of good bad wine since, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's a good thing about bad wine, is that if you have good company, bad wine tastes good. So
I agree. I much prefer bad wine and good company to good wine and good company or bad company or whatever. If you have a bottle of good wine and it's anything but the best bottle of wine you've ever had, it's disappointing. But if you have some bad wine and it helps you things happen in the environment, then it's a lot better.
You pay the price later when you have Don Simon's finest sangria. I don't know if you ever had the joy of trying.
No, I have not, but based on your laugh.
When you go to Spain, if you're really hard up and you really want to get some booze, you always end up going for Don Simon's sangria, which is superbly sweet and fruity, but leaves the most fruitiest hangover the following day.
So I wanted to close up looking toward the future. Do you think it's going to be difficult to convince people after the pandemic to go back to doing all those great things you said, having good sex, bad sex, getting drunk, meeting people from around the world, and sharing a room in close quarters once this is all over?
You know, if I was to be really honest with you, I can't give you an honest answer whether that world of travel will be still there. It's difficult to see how things will shape up, but I know for sure that it won't be easy in the next 1 to 2 years because of social distancing. Dorms will be not possible. They might still be there, but there will be only 2 people in a dorm instead of 8, which might be a good thing. Just like you won't have middle seats in Ryanair flights, and you'll have your own space. There won't be probably social spaces where you can meet people. Those might be closed off for a while. But the one thing I do know about the hostel industry, and I know about hostels, is that when you walk into a hostel, people take great pride and ownership over your experience of the city, because they're run by people who are locals and they really give a damn. It doesn't matter if you spend €10 on your dorm bed, you're greeted the same way. Whereas if you walk into a hotel or, I don't know, Airbnb, unless you're being greeted by a local host, sometimes you get a very cold and personal experience. And that aspect will still be the same. You might still find the cheap bottle of wine and the €1 happy hour drinks. It might be a different experience from the usual experience, but for whatever it will be worth, it will be something worth investing in, because I think it's important to go to places where you support locals and you invest in people. And I think one thing that COVID crisis has taught us is that we will be spending money in places where people care about us, because I think connection, caring, and supporting people who are good people is what life should all be about, and not about rip-off global corporations or chain hotels that just want to take your money and not give a damn about how you feel.
So before we got into the interview, you had said I know a lot about hostels, and I admitted that that's actually quite a lie. I know very little about hostels, and I felt a little bit bad because Kash was kind of challenging the point that hostels aren't, necessarily these places where they're kind of dingy and not fun places to travel. that was more or less, unfortunately, my experience. The one time I did in Ireland, and it kind of soured me from it. But I did recall that in Costa Rica, that I did do the private hostel room thing, and it was actually quite nice. And we were with a group of people. But I don't know. I've never been an out of my shell kind of guy to just kind of like go in like the shared space and be like, "Hey, what's up? Where are you from?" and just like party with everybody. But what about you? Were you ever a hostel person?
Oh yeah,
and I mean the living place, not that were you ever belligerent? Because I know from our conversations that you can be sometimes. Mm-hmm. I love your writing.
You see what I have to deal with, people. This guy.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I deserve it.
No, I love hostels, but I actually have never stayed in what most people kind of envision as a traditional hostel experience, where you get a bunk in that big dorm with 12 to 20 to 40 people. But I think that's really what this interview reminded me of, is that's the misconception, and that's why people write hostels off, because they're like, I don't think that's worth it for me. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't want to necessarily sleep in the same room as strangers. And I've stayed in a ton of hostels. I've stayed, had an amazing one in Lisbon that was extremely high end, where you get the private rooms. And for me, that's worked well, because I'm usually in a group. I've stayed in quads where you have 4 people in one room. And so if you're traveling with another couple or friends, that works well. I've stayed in a 3-person room before. And I've also stayed in like a duo room. So when we went to Portugal this last year, my son and I stayed in hostels the entire time. And there was one where my mom was very nervous, because my mom has not really traveled internationally much. She's been to Mexico, she's been to Canada, that's about it. And she was like, "You're sending me to a hostel? Like, this is scary to me." But we were able to get a bathroom in our own room, which was important to her, and something that is another hesitation people have with hostels. But this particular hostel, it's called Home Sweet Lisbon in Lisbon, Portugal, was amazing. And it had, they brought in a tray full of amazing breakfast in the morning. It was really comfortable and homey. It wasn't really small, but there was all these great, it was fairly large, but there's lots of places where you can mix and mingle with people from all over. And we met a lot of the people that were staying there. So it had that intimacy that I think Kash really talked about, that the people love when they go to hostels. You get to meet people, you get to connect in kind of an organic way that maybe you don't in a hotel. But it really didn't feel budget. And so I felt like if my mom, who was very nervous about the experience, loved it, like there really is a hostel for everybody.
Yeah. And it's funny they used the word intimate, because I was thinking too when he was talking about the bad sex that is had at hostels. I guess in one hand it's like, oh, of course that happens. They're like young drunk people, but also like, damn, really? Like you're in a room with like 10 people and like you're in the bunk bed and like, come on up here, honey, to my bunk and let's disturb 10 strangers.
They could have had a private room too. He did say that they had.
That's
so
true.
We can't assume. And
I'm not saying that these were necessarily his experiences. I'm just saying that these definitely have it. But you're right, a private room that's one thing. But I'm sure I do recall. I do recall when I was in Ireland, waking up at one and just kind of rolling over, and there was like a naked guy and woman, and I'm sure some hanky-panky went on to make myself sound 70. It's usually my joke to you that you sound 70, and I just said hanky-panky. But I'm sure that some things were going on in the middle of the night, but I just thought that part was interesting. But I do actually have, as much as I was never a big hostel guy, I do have fond memories of the ones I stayed in Ireland. I think of the one I stayed in Cork, Ireland. They had the toilet. Granted, we were inebriated, but we kept just flushing this toilet because it had the most aggressive lawnmower sounding flush, and just like you could hear it at the bar downstairs in the middle of the night, and it was just so aggressive, and that had us cracking up. And I think I still have that video. So like whenever I die in like hopefully a long time, and somebody goes through my old things and phones, like, why does he have this video of a toilet, and why are they giggling like schoolboys every time they flush this toilet? So that'll be the legacy that I leave on to the future.
Excellent. I think there are some videos like that of me in Ireland as well. Ireland is a place where it is easy to get inebriated.
that is, I think, on the tourism postcard for them. But why don't we go ahead and move on? I'm getting hungry for some new knowledge, a new word, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you've got a word for us.
I do indeed.
Blah 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 blah.
This is such an important word that it is popular in both in three different languages. I'm going to take that again. This is such an important word that it is used in three different languages: Hindi, Urdu, and Punjabi. And the word is jugaad. And that means an unconventional workaround or a life hack, kind of when you cobble something together, you find a really novel solution to a problem with whatever resource you happen to have on hand. So it's, you're winging it, you're making it work. And I think, honestly, that this is the most 2020 word we could possibly have. I mean, the people that are like, I need to go get groceries and I don't have a mask, giant giraffe costume, done, right? Okay, I have to work from home and suddenly find a way to get everything done while sharing a computer with my spouse. Cool, fine, make it work. Life hack, jugaad, 2020 word for sure.
I also like that the way you spell this out to pronounce it properly is spelled Jew guard, and it just makes me think of, because my brain just rapid fires like this, I think of the Lion's Guard, which is of course Disney's animated, of course it's animated, cartoon show playing off like the future of the Lion King. And I hear Jew Guard and I just think of like, this is like some secret society of Jews who are protecting the world. But then it gets into, I guess, the conspiracy theories that hurts us, which is not at all what I was imagining. I was imagining like a positive, the Jew Guard protecting the world from something or other.
That truly has nothing to do with the spirit of the word, but support you.
I absolutely know that, but that's just what came out when I saw how you spelled it, and I just like, if there is a Jew Guard out there, I would like to be a part of it, please.
Well, what you could do is you could assemble one, and as long as you're winging it and making do with the resources that you have, it could be a Jew Guard, and it would totally be appropriate.
Beautiful.
In two different cultures.
There we go. We solved it.
Blah 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 blah.
And before we go, I wanted to check in with what's going on around the world, because here in Berlin and in Germany, we are starting to relax restrictions from the coronavirus pandemic. And it's kind of, there's a lot of uncertainty going around. People are unsure of like, is this too soon? Is this good? But then, opinion polls in Germany suggest that people think that we're relaxing too soon. But then you go out on the street and absolutely nobody is wearing a mask, so it's hard to determine how seriously people are taking this. And I asked and heard back from at Postcards Places, and she said that she's in France and that businesses, not restaurants and etc., are going to be opening up on Monday if they can do so with physical distancing, which is similar to some relaxations that are coming in Germany. Schools are starting to open in most regions. Parks will open in most regions. Sadly, not hers. And you can go up to 100 kilometers without forms. That's not speed. Like, she's not saying that you can run 100 kilometers an hour without a form. I think she's referring more to the distance that you can leave your domicile. It was up from 1 kilometer. And France did make people fill out a form before they went out, and that's apparently going away. And that France's numbers are going down steadily, so she is ready for some relaxations. I read the, that's gonna sound pompous, I read the New York Times. I did read a few things about what's going on in the States, but catch me up briefly. What are the relaxations going on there? I imagine it's different state by state.
What's different, I think, about the U.S. is that there's not been a united federal response at all. The president has given authority to the governors for reasons that people are probably going to debate for years. So it is extremely state by state. I am in North Dakota and I'm a border city with Minnesota. So lots of people live and work in one state and move back and forth. So there's been no meaningful restrictions to that movement. Minnesota is still basically sheltering in place. North Dakota restaurants and bars and barbershops and those kinds of things were able to open up last week. The majority of people here did not want it. The majority of people say they will not go. I know several restaurants and several, shops and those kinds of places that are opting not to open for the safety of their employees or because they don't have the personal protective gear that they're supposed to have to open. So they're still doing, curbside shopping. I have a favorite indie bookstore that I needed to get a retirement gift for a friend, and they said they weren't comfortable opening. So I called and they did some personal shopping for me. Within an hour, they sent it. I mean, there's lots of people doing, those hacks, that whole Jugaad life hack thing. We're going to figure it out. This is what we have. We don't have enough masks to open. We're going to wait another week. We're going to wait another month until we're comfortable. So there's a gradual reopening, but I think people are really wanting to see what happens in the next 2 weeks and see if the numbers go up, and that will determine the next step.
Germany's actually, so France is definitely like more of a top-down approach, but Germany's actually much more like the U.S. in terms that the states have a lot of the power to decide. Like Bavaria, I believe, was the first to like say strict lockdown before other states, and they were also the first one to say we're going to be opening up. There is some. I think the national government, the Bundestag, Chancellor Merkel has more the power to say that, like, for the general contact restrictions of having to stay 1.5 meters apart from people to keep your distance, social distancing, that's been extended at a federal level. But all the other decisions in terms of restaurants opening back up and stores has been done more at the state level, or we have a few city-states in Germany. So it's actually been similar to the States. It's just, the leader at the top is been a little different in the response, to put it mildly.
Well, that's the benefit of having a scientist leading your country, I think, at this.
We do have a scientist leading our country, and it's so nice, so great. But we could probably talk forever about different restrictions, how we feel about them. But there are about 1 million other podcasts that do that, and they've all launched during the pandemic. I can't believe how many coronavirus-specific podcasts have been launched. It's spreading virally. Ironic. Anywho, that's our show. Thanks for tuning in to Travel Tomorrow. If you want us to give you a shout-out in an upcoming episode, check out our new Patreon at patreon.com/traveltomorrowpod. We'll send you postcards too. Eventually they'll be from around the world when we can start traveling again. And we're done with that. As always, please do us a favor and rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts.
And if you want to talk about the restrictions in your part of the world, if you want to talk about what you want to hear next, or travel issues that you're curious about, feel free to drop us a line on social media. We're at TravelTomPod on Twitter, at TravelTomorrowPod on Facebook, or you can email us anytime at traveltomorrowpod@gmail.com. Thanks as always to the Fiddle Revolt for the theme music, and feel free to subscribe to Travel Tomorrow wherever you get your podcasts.